The Mandalorian ruined virtual production. Yep. You heard me right.
Really?
It ruined the expectation of what virtual production can do. Now let me explain.
I got a little carried away there.
It's November in 2019. The Mandalorian's just been released on Disney+. Everyone is watching it, and the hype around virtual production explodes. The Mandalorian Season 1 is so good, and the virtual production is unlike anything we've seen on a TV set before, that it totally blows the proportion off of what is capable on a standard virtual production set. And then a myth is formed in the virtual production community that this standard of quality can be achieved on any production. And it can't. Still can't.
Not too bad, huh, kid?
But it's important to note those promises were not made by Disney, they weren't made by The Mandalorian. It was the hype made by production studios at the time trying to make a sale. So now we're in 2020 and there are some massive promises associated with virtual production. Because there were 4 main promises made about what virtual production could do, how it would disrupt everything we know about the film industry, and almost all of those turn out to be overhyped.
I'm gonna charge him extra. See how that works?
Number 1, cost effectiveness. A major push in virtual production in the early phases was how cost effective it would be. Your entire production could take place in a single studio. People wouldn't have to travel, there wouldn't have to be as much cost of being on location, on a film set. And of course, there's one massive catch that no one talked about, and that is the initial cost of building and maintaining and running an LED stage. Renting these stages are expensive, up to $70,000 US per day.
I don't have time for this.
And why is that? Because people who bought these LED volumes need to pay it off. Who knows how much they're paying every month to pay off for those panels, for the space, for the electricity, for the staffing. All of these things add up to major bills. And since the initial virtual production boom, we have actually seen studios shut down. They just can't find a cost-effective solution to virtual production. Sure, they have the stage, they have the LEDs, they have the technology, they have everything that you want, but they just can't maintain that level of production every month, day to day, to keep the lights on. Meanwhile, The Mandalorian was funded by Disney. It was a genius experiment that's obviously paid dividends in their merchandising, in their franchising, in the show's multiple seasons. Mando and Baby Yoda are a sellable product by themselves. They're not worried about day-to-day studio costs, but a one-off TV show or a one-off movie has to sell extremely well, often without separate merchandising. Another promise of cost effectiveness was the idea that virtual production has no VFX or post-production required, which saying that now in 2023 is hilarious. The reason why it's so funny is because we know that there were scenes in Mandalorian where the frustum was just green. They weren't entirely sure how they wanted the final shot to look, so they just shot it on green, then they could do whatever they wanted in post-production. And now that I'm thinking about it, what did we think? Did we think that we could merge a practical explosion on set with a fake explosion in the virtual in the background and then somehow that would just work out? I'm guilty of this too. There are so many videos of me on this channel going off about how virtual production will maybe replace green screen or VFX or whatever, and I was just flat wrong. And I'll admit it, I like to admit when I'm wrong. It was wrong. Which brings me to my second point. The ease of use of virtual production. See, back in 2020, it was very easy for studios to say, oh, you just bring your environment or whatever or background, throw it up on the screen, and you can shoot an entire movie. Not the case. There are a ton of logistics to the complications of running a render engine. Anyone who has opened Unreal Engine for their very first time knows this. You think it just might be easy. It's not exactly plug and play, and you have to build your own environments, which means you need sculptors, you need modelers, adding to that cost. And of course, there are pre-built models that you can take from the marketplace and throw into your environment, but that also requires someone who knows exactly what they're doing while running an engine. It's complicated. Nobody looked at the set of 1899 and thought, Yeah, seems pretty straightforward. They just threw something on the screen and away they went. Then of course you need to know how to use the tracking equipment, how to run and operate your LED wall, and the tricks required to operate a camera on an LED wall and make it look good. Oh, and I also forgot about calibration of the camera, which if you've never done before, isn't exactly an easy process. And yes, in terms of ease of use, there is an argument to be made that an actor can be more immersed in the scene because they have the environment around them. That is true. But to get to this point, we need to set up the virtual environment, which requires an entire team. And once you're done with that scene, you have to transition to the other scene, which is a whole other process. Now I'm just gonna pause myself halfway through and say, yes, it sounds like I'm ragging on virtual production. And let's make a distinction here. I'm not. I'm ragging on the promises that virtual production would be easy to use and not complicated, which isn't the case. The people who work on virtual production sets are trained professionals and absolute killers in their field. Mad respect to everyone who works on an LED volume. Now let's jump back in. Number 3, universal application of virtual production for every scene in a movie. Now there was a belief in the early days of virtual production that it could be used for anything. Now technically that is true, but is it the best use case? Probably not. There was even a fear that virtual production was gonna completely replace traditional film sets. Not the case. Virtual production has predominantly been used for select cases for certain shots or certain scenes in movies and TV. Perfect example of a selective, smart use of virtual production is this scene from House of the Dragon. So what fueled this belief? Well, it's probably the fact that most of The Mandalorian, and I say most, not all, most of The Mandalorian was shot on an LED volume. But we've got to remember the set of The Mandalorian and the set of 1899 were built particularly for those shows. And they're executed very, very well. Now, can you replicate that in your production? Maybe. I don't know why I said it like that, but actually genuinely maybe. And finally, the last promise. I was hearing this everywhere. Maybe it was just marketing. Maybe people were just getting overhyped about virtual production. Maybe people just loved The Mandalorian so much that they just wanted this as a reality. This was the promise that LED virtual production was going to replace green screen. I'm guilty of this too. I made this video which said that LED is going to replace green screen. To be fair, it was a little bit of clickbait. Now there are some crazy solutions where you can use LED and green screen at the same time. But the point is, to do VFX today in 2024, got the year right this time, you need green screen, all right? I don't make the rules. We love LED, we love volumes, we love the cool tech stuff, but sometimes you just need a good old green screen to get the job done. That's it. Don't hate me.